Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Kaliroy Stavrianou, and on behalf of Global Clinical Engineering Alliance, I'm really happy to moderate this series of webinars that aim to educate, promote collaboration, and also promote information exchange about healthcare technology, engineering, and patients' outcomes. All webinars are recorded, archived, and also live streamed on Facebook. Following the completion of the webinar, the recording material will be accessible on our website, www.globalcea.org. Please note that at the bottom of the screen, you have a Q&A button where you can submit questions to the faculty, and those questions will be addressed towards the end of the webinar. In addition, for posting general comments, there is the option of the chat box for audience interaction. Please use only the Q&A for your questions and not the chat. GCEA is really excited to announce once again the addition of a new live translation feature that we believe will bridge the language gap and enhance your video conference experience. All you have to do is simply click on the Captions tab at the bottom of your screen and select the language you would like to read from the drop-down menu. Today's webinar is entitled Reimagining Education and Training for Healthcare Technology Management. I'm really looking forward to this webinar, and now I'm very pleased to give the floor to the webinar's moderator, Mladen Poluta, who is a clinical engineering and health technology management advisor and consultant, former director of health technology, Western Cape Department of Health in South Africa, and GCEA Founders Council member. Mladen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kaliroy. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. The subtitle of today's webinar includes the concept of extended reality. These words are particularly apt for a global audience such as we have today, since clinical engineering and health technology management colleagues and stakeholders joining this webinar represent a wide range of realities spread across many regions, from well-resourced to poorly resourced. The question we should ask ourselves is, how can emerging technologies and smart solutions and tools, such as those that will be covered in this webinar, bridge these different realities, support global capacity building, and promote greater equity? It's my great pleasure to moderate this webinar, and I would like to introduce our two speakers. First up is Richard or Monty Gonzalez. He is president of the College of Biomedical Equipment Technology, has a doctorate in education and a master's in history, serves on the executive board of NVRT Labs, an extended reality company focusing on training content for clinical engineering and health technology management, and is a member of GCEA's Education Committee. Matthew Bassuk will follow. He is CEO of NVRT Labs, has an MBA and a master's in global leadership, and is an experienced digital learning and training consultant. Matthew is also the governing board member of the College of Biomedical Equipment Technology. Without further ado, and very much looking forward to what we are about to see and hear, may I invite you, Richard, to commence your presentation. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mladen. I'd just like to start by really providing my gratitude and thanks to our leader in this endeavor, Yadin David. Truly appreciative to have the forum to present this topic to an international audience. Professors Poluta and Khalil, thanks to you for your support as well. And looking forward to a really engaging conversation. Very interested in the questions and perspectives from the broad international audience that registered for this conversation. So if you have questions or thoughts as we go through this, please bring them forward. Matt and I obviously live and work in the United States, so our perspective sometimes is a little bit narrower. And so we're excited to hear from you, and hopefully as excited as you are to hear from us. our thoughts. But we approach this and look at this as a really global effort and an international effort, and we are all fighting against the same things in many cases, and in some cases the difficulties that our friends in the international arena are facing are slightly different than ours, slightly different barriers. So we hope to address some of those on the call today. We hope to present what we see as the present state of education and training for healthcare technology management. And then we want to look towards the future and talk about where we feel it's going and what we can do to contribute to the fight that all of us face on a daily basis in overcoming the obstacles that might have been pointed towards, and some others that we see. So without further ado, thank you everyone for the call. Callie and Mary, thank you for setting this up. We appreciate it. Matt, if you take us to the next slide. So just a little bit more about the two of us and what we do. The college was founded in 2010. And so we've spent nearly 15 years now working directly, specifically in this space. We do not have a wide range of programs. Our programs are focused very narrowly on biomedical equipment technology, advanced imaging technology, healthcare compliance and accreditation, and that's where we keep our focus. We don't want to get into other programs. We're not interested in that. We're interested in the healthcare space, and that's what we've been building into. So our expertise and our interest is in those areas, like I think yours is, and I think that keeps us close to the mark. One of our stated objectives over the last 15 years or so has been to really walk forward into this industry with no light between what we provide on the education and training side and what you experience and need on the service side in operations. Too often we feel in education that there's a gap that exists between what students are receiving on the education and training component and what they are then experiencing in the world when they go out there and put those skills to work. So our goal is to make sure that students leave our programs with the skills necessary to go to work. And really much of this conversation is going to be geared towards that topic and that conversation. And what can we do? How can we leverage advanced technologies to close that gap, close that skills gap, and make sure that the students that are leaving our institution and others are as prepared as we can possibly make them. Next slide. So big picture in terms of how we see the current state of things in the world. And there was a really interesting book written a year or two ago called The Great Upheaval. I'm not sure if anyone's had a chance to read that book, but a fantastic look at education and training and the state of things today and where we're going. And one of the things that I find really interesting is the concept of revolution or evolution. And we're of the opinion that we're in a state of revolution, revolutionary change, advanced change. And there's a number of factors that are causing that advance and causing the direction we're going. If we look back at the last 100, 150, 200 years of education and training, we can see that we have a really rich foundation, a really rich foundation of training and educational models and things that we've built. Much of which, however, has been built on sort of that industrial era thought, traditional brick and mortar schools, very traditional models for education and training. And we've now entered into a period of really just massive disruption, all sorts of changes. Everything from the pandemic to technology to you name it, there's so much change, it's hard to keep up. And from an educational perspective, it's really challenging. It's difficult to keep pace with the world around us when you're entering AI into this conversation, right? There's so many challenges to what we've been doing in the past. So Matt and I are perspective and belief that that's a challenge we're ready to take. And we feel like if we're going to compete in this world and we're going to provide the quality education and training that's necessary, the only way to do that is to start to refine new ways and develop new methods to address these demands and to better serve the workforce in the healthcare technology management arena. So as we look forward, there are many knowns, there's many unknowns. We don't know which direction AI is going to take us, as an example, and we don't know, how rapidly other technologies are going to advance. One of the things that Matt has sort of built our programs around is proofing and future proofing what it is that we do. That's a challenge. That's a significant challenge, not just for the software, but the hardware as well. There's always new competition out there and always new ways to do things, and it's hard to develop and move at that same. Next slide, please. So I'd like to introduce the folks that I talked to a number of different thought leaders and books as we go through these webinars. And another one that I would encourage this audience to consider looking at is a book titled The Exponential Era, which is a fascinating title. I love the title, but really points to what we see as the change and the direction in higher education and training. The entire premise of the book points towards these massive chaotic changes and disruptions, and they can either be opportunities or they can lead to catastrophic failure. We'd like to think that sort of disruption and chaos can lead to great opportunity. I think this forum and working with the GCEA presents an excellent example of that. We have a list of global thought leaders from around the world participating in this webinar and open to this sort of discussion and topic. It's exactly what we need to do. It's the only way we're going to set the conditions to thrive and not just survive. And so when we look at education and training, we have to ask ourselves, what is it that we want to get out of this? Are we in survival mode, just trying to make it through this era of chaotic change? Or are we going to look at this and say, okay, let's do things differently. Let's shake things up and let's try something different, because what we've done in the past is no longer effective. And what we've done in the past is no longer going to serve the needs of this global community. It's just not. So next slide, please. So I'm going to point to three megatrends that we feel are really contributing maybe disproportionately to what's happening in the world around us, particularly with healthcare and education and training. One of those is advanced technologies. And I created this slide presentation here specifically just to kind of paint the picture. I spent 21 years serving in the Army, and when I joined the Army, one of the most important pieces of equipment that I was issued was a compass. My lensatic compass served me well for many years, got me from point A to point B. When I retired from the Army in 2009, they didn't even ask me to turn the compass back in, so I still have it, and it still works, and it still points to true north, magnetic north rather, but it's of limited use to me today. It's an object for a museum. Same with the old computer there. If I was able to see all of your hands and ask you how many of you had one of these computers or a word processor like it, there'd probably many of you raising your hands saying, oh yeah, I had one of those. That technology is of the past. And so today when we look around us, what are we looking at? Today we're talking about quantum computing and really high-end technology and things that 20 years ago we couldn't have imagined. So now we look at the world around us and we think, okay, are we keeping pace with these advanced technologies? Can we keep pace with that? And so again, one of the mega trends that is pushing the development of higher education and training absolutely is advancements in technology, and the challenge to groups like this, which is keeping up with that. How do we keep pace with that? And how do we continue to deliver to students who are now born into this world where they're native to these things? Children born today are just absolutely comfortable in this space, and not all of us are necessarily. Matt and I last year polled a dozen students, high school students, age 16 to 18, into our office in San Antonio, Texas, and had a conversation with them, talking to them about virtual reality technology, and asked them, how many of you have experienced VR, either just in gaming or in some sort of learning environment? And I want to say about 90% of them either owned a VR device or had at least experienced it either in training or gaming or one form or another. 100% of them were very comfortable with the concept. So this, the next generation, as we look towards the future of education and training, there's no doubt in my mind that it's going to be a powerful component of what we do. So as we think about this and think about that as a megatrend, that's definitely an important one. So next slide, please. I think the other obvious megatrend that we're facing in today's world as we assess the current state of affairs is the global pandemic. There, I think probably no one on this call, certainly, especially for my colleagues out there working in the healthcare industry, I doubt anybody escaped the impacts of the pandemic. And I know many of you are still out there dealing with the legacy of that event. We don't think it'll be the last time that happens, but it's certainly something that has affected education and training. For us, what we found was that it accelerated the pace of move towards advanced technologies and how we can leverage those technologies. We have provided historically the bulk of our education and training in an online format. And for many years, there were those that doubted that. I have to admit, I'm a bit of a degree snob myself, and I have my education and training came from traditional institutions for the bulk of that, and it took me some time to learn and accept and embrace and see the power of online education and training and the integration of advanced technologies. So I absolutely know that the pandemic was a huge factor in accelerating our growth, specifically, but also a much broader acceptance of concepts that Matt is going to talk to you about here in a few minutes, and a willingness to explore how advanced technology can help shape and reshape education and training. Quite honestly, it's the only way we can combat, in my mind, future events like this. It's certainly an interesting challenge in healthcare, but it was also a very interesting challenge in education. Overnight, big institutions were no longer putting students in seats and having discussions in classrooms. And there was a massive scramble towards the other ways of supporting students and not breaking continuity. Second megatrend that we see are events like the pandemic that we've gone through. So technology and those sort of uncontrollable natural disasters or human-made disasters are a second one. So next slide, please. And then lastly, that leads us into the sort of third megatrend that we see, and that's really just sort of that broader acceptance of and understanding that we're moving into a knowledge-based economy. And the things that motivated us and drove us towards education and training models of the past, that industrial-based model, they're no longer a reality. The economy is no longer based on those things alone, and we're no longer limited by the geography that we were limited to. There's no reason a student in India should not have access to the same education and training that a student in Canada has. Technology allows us to overcome those geographical boundaries. So, reflective of all of the people on this call, and I looked at the registrants for the call, it was amazing. I think there were probably 20, 25 countries represented in this conversation. I think that's exactly what we have to do. That's the only way that we can combat all of these megatrends and really move towards advancing education and training towards that knowledge-based economy kind of concept, and take advantage of all the tools that are at our disposal now. So fascinating forces at work shaping what we do and how we do it, and truly just unlimited potential. Next slide. And so this is kind of where I'm going to leave off in terms of setting context for our thought and approach to education and training. And kind of like the way this presents, we have those mega trends that are forcing change, and this convergence of activity and thought and requirements and work, massive disruption. I like the term hyperconnectivity. Again, reflective of the people in this call. It used to be, if I needed to speak to my friend Callie in London, I would have to call her, and I'd spend $1.50 on it. I can contact her for free now using FaceTime or a Zoom app. So the connectivity is just completely different than what we faced in the past. Massive changes in terms of enabling technologies, some of which we're still struggling with and trying to understand. I think there's healthcare in particular is looking at all of the different opportunities and potential of AI, but it doesn't come without tremendous risk either. It's one of the other challenges we're going to have to face as a collective body is how do we brace for the challenges that are going to come with the advantages that this technology offers. And then just the convergence in terms of what that outcome looks like. What are the expectations of the students that we're going to have in the future? Again, I know, reflecting on my own experience, I wasn't 100% sure what to expect when I went to school on the first day of college and university. And I was fortunate to have wonderful professors guide me, mentor me, but I think the expectations that I had as a student in my younger days are drastically different than those of the students today. And I think we're going to see a massive shift towards high return on investment, ROI type training. Expectations where training and education is more accessible. Expectations that break the boundaries of traditional thought. So in the past, we've thought about school and education, and you show up on day one and you have 8 weeks of class. At the end of that 8 weeks, you get your 3 credits and you're done and you continue on. We're of the opinion that that model needs to be broken. And if you engage in education and training, knowing full well that technology is advancing as fast as it is, there should be an expectation that you can come back and retrain and revisit those topics. And continue to engage and truly become a lifelong learner, truly gain skills mastery. And I think XR provides a really just unlimited potential in terms of getting into that sort of new approach to education and training. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop boring you. I promise to be boring on the first 15 minutes and set the conditions for Matt, who's going to present some really exciting topics on technology and show you a little bit about what we've been doing over the past few years. And look forward to hearing from you. Matt?
Awesome. Well, thank you, Monty. My name is Matt Bassick. I've been the Director of Learning Technologies for the College of Biomedical Equipment Technology for the last 4 years. I've just recently switched gears entirely into doing XR development full-time with the company, our company called Invert Labs, or NVRT Labs, and we're here to build all of the content for HTMs and biomeds around equipment technicians and repair. So that's kind of what we're focused on full-time. My background, I've done everything from instructional design, e-learning development, learning integrations, learning platforms, and it kind of just parlayed its way into, how do we get our students more hands-on experience in a virtual way? Being an online program, that's kind of where the idea came from. We started looking at different emerging technologies and what we might be able to leverage to be able to fill that gap. And we really feel like we found a really powerful, unique approach with XR technologies, and using that to create these immersive experiences that really do an amazing job at training. So I think in this this kind of goes back to Monty liking to plug the different publications and books that he likes to read. But there's a really great a book called The Metaverse, and it kind of tees up the concept of what we believe the next paradigm shift is in our society, right? So you know, megatrends. Last major one might have been mobile devices. Maybe the next one is the metaverse and doing everything in virtual 3D space. So what is the metaverse? I think right now it's an idea. Right now it's a concept. If you think back to the 2018 movie Ready Player One, I think a lot of people think of the metaverse from that lens. If you haven't seen it, basically it's a film about society where everybody does everything in their lives in a headset, and their virtual reality is more of their life than their physical reality. And so everything is interconnected, and all of their interactions are in a digital universe, and that's where they live their lives. And so I think it's a good concept. It's a kind of an outlandish concept, but I think that's what a lot of people think of whenever they think of the metaverse. What the metaverse actually is, and I say that we kind of co-opt that term a little bit because it doesn't exist. But what we kind of like to say is, if something falls in the realm of XR, extended reality, mixed reality, augmented reality, virtual reality, we kind of say, okay, that's all metaverse-esque. And so that's kind of what we mean when we say metaverse. I think the best description that I found was Deloitte did a primer in 2022 that kind of described what the metaverse is and what the next iteration of it might look like. And what they said was, it's a persistent and interconnected network of 3D virtual worlds. And they'll eventually serve as the gateway for almost all online experiences. But it's the next significant paradigm for how we're using digital technologies and networks to interact and collaborate with all kinds of different virtual experiences. So it's one important thing is, it's not a single technology. It's not a single device. It's not Mark Zuckerberg and Meta. I know that he, you know, created a lot of headlines in 2021 when they rebranded Facebook to Meta, because he's got his own ideas to what the future looks like for this technology. But the metaverse is bigger than that. It's right now it's in its infancy as far as the concept, but there's a lot of opportunity, and there's a lot of different technologies that impact what we think of whenever we say metaverse. So I'm gonna try to break that down a little bit here, and then we're gonna look at some examples of different applications of these technologies, and then we'll pull it back to what we're doing in our space in healthcare and with HTM. Okay, so when I say XR, I mean extended reality. And so extended reality is made up of really 3 different components. Excuse me. So we've got virtual reality, which you're probably familiar with, VR. I've got a picture up here of Beat Saber, which is probably the world's most popular VR game. Basically, if you're inside a headset and you're using swords and beating these blocks as they come at you to music. And so it's kind of a really interesting but fun game. But that's an immersive experience. And so that qualifies as virtual reality, which I think everybody's more or less familiar with. I'll show you some examples here in a second of different cool immersive experiences. But that's that's the distinction of virtual reality. Is it's, you don't see the world around you. You're totally in another place. You've got a headset on that just blocks out the physical world, and you're transported to a digital world. Augmented reality, on the other hand, is just like it sounds. You're augmenting what's really in front of you. So in 2016, everybody everybody I knew was walking around with their smartphone trying to catch Pokemon in the street. And so I don't know if you remember Pokemon Go. It was really big here in the States. I think it had a really big global adoption as well. But basically, that's an augmented reality experience. You're using a device, a handheld device, a mobile device, to see something that's not there and to augment your world in some way. And so in this case, it was putting, Pokemon on the street corner. And other examples I'll show you here. I mean, you could, augmented reality is anything from Snapchat filters or Instagram filters that change your hair color or, make you look 80 years old or turn you into a baby. All those things are augmenting reality. And then mixed reality, which I sometimes hear get called XR, but it's really MR. Mixed reality is kind of a blend of those two things, and then kind of takes it a step further. Because what you're doing is you're putting on an actual headset, kind of like VR. And I've got, if my background lets me display it, there we go. I've got an Oculus Quest Pro here, and it's wearing a headset. In this photo, she's wearing a HoloLens, but it's augmenting the world in front of you and kind of doing these overlays on top of what you're physically seeing, and then in a way that you can actually interact with it. So it's kind of a blend of these two different technologies. So the fun part here, let me show you some examples of what these look like. The first one being, well, I'll jump right in and show you one that we did as far as virtual reality. And so this is everybody can see my screen okay, right? This is a module that we did. We're still in development on it, but it's on a Physio-Control LifePak 20E PM procedure. So as a critical care device, you have to do PM procedures on these annually. You have to make sure that, as a biomed, you have to do all the operational checkouts. You have to make sure that if you're running a performance wave or a sine wave, that you're getting the right reading from your test equipment. You're counting cubes on your printout strips so that you know that your amplitude's correct and you're getting the right printouts on these defibrillators. And so we did is we took that whole process and we recreated it in virtual. We're able to cheat a little bit in the sense that we get the benefits of virtual reality. We get to make the screen a little bit bigger. We get to make certain things a little bit easier to interact with. But this replicates the exact procedures that you would do on this device in real life, just in a virtual space. So right now we're checking the paper, the printer paper. Let me fast forward it just a little bit. You have to go through all these different button protocols, and you have to make sure that all the buttons are working. And then the really cool part, I want to show you a sine wave, is using a virtual test device. This is a Fluke 7000. It's a defib analyzer that we've also modeled and recreated in virtual, and it's actually sending the signal to this virtual LifePak 20, and you're able to see exactly in virtual what you would see in real life. So Miami is not the best angle. Let's see if I can get a better one. Here we go. So you can see we've got a sine wave on the device, and then we're actually providing a charge to the defib analyzer and making sure that it's tracking the right amount of energy delivered. So anyway, that's one example of VR technology. Jumping over to augmented reality, let me show you one that's not us, but I thought was a pretty cool example. And this is just for commerce. So just in general, this will give you an idea as to what is capable or possible with AR technology. So somebody's on the beach, they're walking around with their cell phone, and this is a commerce experience. So they're going into a digital store. As they walk through this portal that's on the beach, it's all geolocated. They can look around using the screen on their phone and see an entirely different world. So this is all augmented. They're not wearing a device, although they could be. Maybe turn this into more of a mixed reality experience, but they are seeing something in their world that's being augmented. And so that's a cool example of augmented reality. What we did with augmented reality is applied the same concept to the repair of medical devices. And so last year at the AMI conference, which is a big biomedical association conference here in the States, it actually happened to be in our backyard, which is here in San Antonio, Texas. And we partnered with Tenacor, which is a ISO and OEM based out of California, to come up with this little proof of concept module where we can actually walk users through how to do a specific procedure on this device. So using object recognition, AI, and Unity, we created this application that basically you just push on the button, the option on the screen, you choose your procedure. In this case, it was a battery replacement, something really easy. And then it would actually say, okay, you take out these 4 screws, you pull off the battery pack, you put a new one on, and that's that was the whole interaction. So that's a good application of AR technology. Mixed reality, we're just starting to dabble as Invert Labs into mixed reality, but I did pull a couple of examples just to kind of get your head thinking a little bit about what's possible with mixed reality. And so this is an example I found from Shopify. I don't know if you've ever tried to create or build IKEA furniture, but something like this, you know, wearing a Quest Pro or a HoloLens would be really helpful, probably save you from a lot of frustrations or maybe even marital fights if you're like me, putting together these different pieces of furniture, or in this case, I guess a kid's kitchen set. So that's a good example of mixed reality, and I've got one more to share. This one is really cool. Kind of combining AI with mixed reality, which is where the future is going. I know that's the hot button right now, is everything that's happening with AI, and you know how well these large language models are producing content or being able to digest videos. So this AI mixed reality experience is basically remaps your any room that you've got. It kind of gets all the data points and says, okay, I know I'm in your living room, and now I can display in your headset a memory, being a video that you had saved on your phone or in your photo roll, and it'll display it right in your 3D space, in the same place that it happened. And so that's a really cool application of mixed reality and AI technology. And you know, we're in the future. It's the future is now. So let's move forward. There's a lot of different new technologies coming out. I just want to give you a lay of the land as to what's out there right now. Some of the high-end hardware devices that are coming out. You probably heard of Microsoft's HoloLens. Obviously, Meta Quest or Oculus Quest, they've just come out with their Pro device, which I showed you. That's at the top of the market. But beyond just headsets, there's starting to be a lot more players in the haptic space, which is, there's a picture here of Tesla suits, which are, that's just kind of a co-opted name. No lines to Elon Musk or Tesla, but the Tesla suit is a full body suit that gives you haptic feedback, you know, based off of whatever you're interacting with in real life. So if you get a chance to check that out, that's a pretty cool application of new technology. And then there's another company called Mojo that is developing contact lenses that have augmented reality. So we're starting to get smaller form factor. We're starting to get a little bit faster and more powerful. And so this whole industry is taking off, and everybody's creating newer and cooler things. Every day there's a new article about some new technology that folds right into the space. A couple things here that I wanted to note is the investments that are, you know, on at the you know, the financial level of this space. I think, you know, Accenture just ordered 60,000 headsets from Meta for HR training. for their brand, and that's, you know, a drop in the bucket compared to how many of these devices are shipping. And I know there's a lot of headlines out there now that it's like, oh well, maybe the metaverse isn't going to take off, or maybe it's slowing down, or you know, Facebook didn't make all the numbers that they wanted to. But you got to realize is we're still in the very infancy of this, and I think, you know, everybody's probably just taking a little step back before it really takes off in a much bigger way. I'll get into that in a little bit. In just a little bit. So now that we kind of have a lay of the land for what this technology is, I wanted to just see if we can communicate how effective it is for training in particular. And so we pulled a few stats. The first one, so the CEO of Miami Children's Health, they did a pilot program with VR training, and he told Fortune magazine that basically their retention rate was at 80% after a year, as compared to only 20% for their traditional. So they kind of did a control experiment. I always admire the people that can do experiments and collect the data, because, you know, in my world, we don't have time as much to do the studies, but I really appreciate the ones that do it, because they're proving what we already know to be true, and that is it's incredibly powerful for training, and it's incredibly powerful for retention, for performance, improved performance. There was one study where they took a group of med students, surgeons, and they had them perform a procedure. Half of the group performed a procedure in VR. It was dissecting a gallbladder, and then half of them did it without doing the VR first. The ones that did the VR experience, they were 6 times less likely to have an error in their procedure, and then they were faster. They performed it better. All these different data points. It was just really a cool study, and I'll share it in the notes whenever we share the PowerPoint presentation. But all that to say is VR is incredibly powerful for training. It's incredibly powerful for retention, and we have some of our own experiences with that as well. So I mentioned last year at the AMI conference here in San Antonio, Texas, we actually took a group of, there's 2 groups of 10 students, and I say students because we invited all the biomeds in the industry, but it was predominantly students from St. Clair's in Ontario, and a few other programs. And these are students that had no real hands-on background. They're not technicians. They don't have 20 years of experience. And we put them through our module around contrast injectors. So contrast injectors is this device that you see here on the screen. It's an imaging device that pumps iodine contrast fluid into your veins, so that whenever you go get a CT scan, all of your arteries and veins light up on the CT scan. And so, being that it's an imaging device, it's right on that borderline of being biomed equipment and being imaging equipment. So we feel like it was a really good opportunity to get a device that's kind of complex into some of the junior level biomeds repertoire. And so we had 10 students go through an hour presentation on this is what a contrast injector is. This is how it works. This is the clinical applications of it. After that, we took them down to a VR lab. We call it a lab. It's a big room. And we had 9 or 10 students going through the same procedure for about 20, 30 minutes, in which they did the full PM procedure on the unit, and they took off all the gaskets, and they unclipped all the ribbon cables, and they replaced some components and put it back together. And then we asked them, okay, do you feel like you could do this in real life? And we got resounding yeses. Everybody said, absolutely, I can do this, no problem. We say, okay, great. Glad you feel that way. Now it's time to prove it. We took them back upstairs, and we had 4 real units, live units, and every single one of those students performed that procedure in under 2 hours, which is the industry standard for seasoned technicians to do the same procedure. So we felt very, very validated in our approach. We feel like this is extremely powerful training. You can put somebody in the headset, and in 15 minutes they come out of it and say, I know Kung Fu, just like the Matrix from 2000. So we feel like this is got so much opportunity to do the same thing with all these different interactions and all these different medical devices. So we decided to create more. So I'll show you really quick. This is a suction regulator module that we did. We're still working on as part of our content library. Give it a second for the stream to turn high res. There we go. And so same exact idea. We're going through different procedural steps to take apart this suction regulator. We're going to take out some filters. We're going to replace some O-rings. And then we've also got the test equipment. This here is a Pronk Sim Cube, which has a manometer setting, which tests the pressure of the suction. So let me just jump forward a little bit so you can see some of the cool interactions. It's all very didactic, very tactile. This is just a QA video. I'm going back and forth to the developers on this. So we're taking out filters, we're discarding them in the waste bin. We even have a stereo here so that you can change the music that's playing in the background. And we feel like that does such a really good job of creating these immersive worlds that make all the learning stick. So I'm gonna see if we can get to a good stopping point here because I want to leave some time for questions. Let me jump back over to the presentation. I'll tell you really quick, this is a Gartner hype cycle. If you're familiar with a hype cycle, every new and emerging technology kind of goes through this same cycle. And when you think about this, think about cryptocurrency, which I think is on here somewhere. Everything starts off with an innovation trigger. Everyone gets really excited about it. Next thing you know, there's a million startups around it. There's a new version of it. Think about ChatGPT right now. Now you've got, you know, Bing. Bing has their own AI. Google just released Bard. There's all these different AI chatbots out there, and then it's starting to really crescendo. After the initial hype, we get, you know, these peak of inflated expectations. Everybody thinks, oh, it's the next, you know, wave of the future. Sometimes there's a drop off. Most of the time there's going to be a drop off. Think about NFTs from last summer. Everybody was spending, you know, $1 million on the Bored Ape pictures, and then all of a sudden that market just dried up, and so everybody kind of was like, okay, well, this fad is over, and we went down into the trough of disillusionment. Now, that's not where everything stops, though. Everything will kind of balance out, and you'll find those applications that we actually have utility. So something like NFTs, they're not dead. I don't think anybody's going to spend $1 million for a Bored Ape anymore, but you'll start to find those applications where you really do get some productivity, and you go out of the slope of enlightenment and into the plateau of productivity. And that's where we find that, you know, we really kind of grow into a mature technology that is solving a purpose and is solving a problem and has a purpose. So right now, you can see on the macro trends that the Gartner believes that the metaverse is still in its infancy. And I think so too. I think that there's some technologies that maybe have done a micro version of this hype cycle already. But I think in general, when you think about the interconnected, you know, next paradigm of what the internet looks like with Web3 and you know, AI and the metaverse kind of converging, I think we're very much at the very front end of this, and there's so much opportunity that's yet to be played out. Just a little bit about our process. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because we've got only a handful of minutes left. But basically, every time we do an interaction, we scope it down to what we can fit into 20 or 30 minutes. In VR, we get the you know, that means that a real procedure that takes an hour or two can sometimes be condensed down to 20 or 30 minutes in VR because of the magic of virtual reality. But we start off with a very well scoped interaction, whether that's an operator procedure or a preventive maintenance procedure or even a troubleshooting procedure. We storyboard it out a little bit. We do a full teardown of our documentation so that we can recreate the models in 3D space. I've got one 3D modeler on my team who's just absolutely amazing. He's actually based in Croatia, and he does remarkable work because he's got a background in engineering. But we'll recreate every component of the device in 3D space, throw that into our storyboard. Then we're taking all of that and putting it into Unity and doing C# development so that we can actually interact with them and recreate some of these procedures. So that's kind of our approach. And we get really complex. So this is an AMX4 portable X-ray unit. You can see on the left here, just crazy complex circuitry with big transistors and transformers and capacitors and batteries. And yeah, no problem. We'll just recreate it in digital and create our digital twin, if you will. So I've got a handful of other applications. I'm going to stop here just because I feel like there's going to be some questions we want to get to. But if you get a chance, there's some really cool VR technologies that are out there where people have taken this training and applied it to healthcare space, including nursing, including this is an ECMO device. There's a surgery module that's really cool. And then Medtronics did a really cool interaction on intubation with a group called Lucid Reality Labs. And so there's some really neat stuff that's out there. If you get a chance to check it out, I encourage you, and I will have some links if we share this presentation. So that's it for me. I do want to get to some questions if any popped up. I know we kind of covered a lot of ground, but I'll kick it back over to the moderators.
Thank you very much, Richard and Matthew. Were you going to run your polling questions, or shall we skip those?
Oh, you know what? I did forget about those. So I think we can do that. I had a couple polling questions. I always like to ask the audience anytime we're doing a presentation is, have you ever experienced virtual reality? I try to get a baseline number for, in general, how many people, show of hands or just answer the poll quickly, have experienced virtual reality at least once in the past, whether you got a Quest device and put on Beat Saber, or you went to an arcade and saw some zombie experience. Just in general, have you experienced virtual reality in any form? Maybe it's Google Cardboard and you've done a 360 walkthrough. I've done a few of those. Those are really neat. We'll give just a couple seconds so everybody can answer if everyone's still online. Okay, so we've got 45% of you said yes and 55% have said no, and that's actually in line with what we see. Usually it's around 50% of the population, of the adult population, has experienced VR in some form or fashion, and as you go younger on the age scale, I mean, that just keeps more and more. The number goes up and up and up. Like Monty was mentioning, we had high schoolers come out here and we said, show of hands, how many of you have experienced VR? And it was 100% of them. Every single one of them have done this in some way. So that's a good indication that this is where training is going as well. So thank you. The next poll was how many people have experienced VR specifically for training. And my guess is that's going to be a smaller number, but just for our own edification, we like to get a baseline for how many people are experiencing this, because we do see it as the future. We see it as the next wave, and I think that it's a good sign that we're moving in the right direction. So just a couple more seconds to answer the poll, and then we'll take a look at the percentages. Yeah, so 16% have done this for training, which is actually fantastic. I mean, I would love to pick your brains about what those experiences were, but you can see, okay, that number is starting off small, it just keeps growing. Every time we ask the question, depending on where we're at, obviously it varies, but it's going up. Over time, more and more people are experiencing the power of VR for education, and we're really encouraged by that. So thanks for participating in those quick poll questions. I meant to get to them earlier, but I think now would be a great time to see if any questions came through.
Yeah, so Richard, Matthew, thank you very much for your detailed presentations, for such a wonderful overview, but also the detail of what is possible. I feel like I've just had a major technology fix, and I'll probably go through the trough of disillusionment in half an hour. But for now, while we're all on a high, I just want to thank you again. There has been an active chat. There have also been a number of questions that have been posed. Some of those have been answered. Richard or Matt, I'm not sure if you'd like to have a go at some of the questions that have not been answered yet.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
sure. I think I'll start with one of them. I saw as Matt was presenting, I was answering a couple of them. One of the questions that I think is really interesting and poses probably the greatest challenge revolves around limitations, and I'm going to blend two questions together here. It was around limitations in terms of, what are barriers to entry into this space right now? And I can tell you on that end, one of the things that we struggle with, and Yadin pointed to it in the comments as well, is this costs money to develop. The potential is unlimited, but it's also very expensive to develop the technology. So in order for us to rapidly build a content library that can have a global impact, it's going to take more than Matt and his team working tirelessly to put this together. It's going to take a global effort, a large effort of thought leaders and willing participants to go down this road with us. And so part of our hope with this call is that we can track some of those people to this effort and say, okay, let's look at how we can rapidly fund this effort and reach that audience that could truly benefit from this. And so then that speaks to a second part of that question is, economies of scale in the US. There's a certain price point that we can put on education and training, but in other parts of the world, that's just an absolute barrier to entry. So one of the things that Matt and I hope to do is really consider sort of the democratization of education and training, and how can we deliver quality training to parts of the world that would otherwise not have access to that. I think that's a really important thing that this group should consider. And then that leads to the last part of the question, and I'm blending a couple of questions that were posed together here. And that is, how do you develop education and training that can keep pace? One of the participants commented that if you develop training content today, there's no guarantees that that training content is still valid 2 years from now, 3 years from now. I think that the content that Matt creates and builds can be adjusted and can be tweaked over time. It can keep pace with technology, or at least get us really close. So I think those are really good questions and really good challenges, but it's definitely going to take a team of thought leaders to address all of them.
Thank you, Richard. Richard, one of the points that you made in your presentation was that there's huge potential here for democratization of education and training. And I fully subscribe to that. It can help overcome the massive boundaries, whether they are geographical or language or professional or otherwise, but also be a powerful enabler of continuing professional development. Because as has been said in the chat, what students are taught today could be out of date in 2 years' time. So it provides the opportunity for tracking, if you like, technology process. But if we take a step back from that, if we look back at considering that we've got a global audience here, I'm involved in 2 projects where biomedical engineering or clinical engineering colleagues in certain countries, they get donated equipment, and the equipment doesn't even come with maintenance manuals or service instructions. So there's a huge inequality gap there that hopefully these kinds of technologies, as you said, Richard, through concerted action of many parties, but that gap could begin to be filled. And I do think that manufacturers have got a certain responsibility here to come to the party to ensure that that wherever the equipment is used, that there at least a basic level of information that is provided that supports the proper and safe use of that equipment. Matthew, in your inverted pyramid that basically demonstrated the importance of actually, doing something, I think just that underlines the importance, of not just knowledge, but also practice and skills and demonstrated behavior in terms of demonstrated competency, because ultimately what we want is competent individuals and not just individuals that have a certain minimum knowledge. And that leads me to my third point, and then I'll stop. It also, the question that arises for me, and then there's been a very fruitful discussion around the clinical engineering body of knowledge and body of practice in chat. So what components of the clinical engineering body or bodies of knowledge and body or bodies of practice would lend themselves to extended reality or virtual reality in particular, and interventions related to that? So I don't know if you've got any comments, but otherwise I'll open up the floor to yourself or anybody else who'd like to contribute.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just to touch on a couple of those things, you're absolutely right. Everybody, they learn best by doing, and I think that we're going to do everything we can to get to be able to fill that gap to where we know that there's just a bunch of medical equipment that sits in hallways and doesn't ever get worked on because nobody knows how to fix them. And maybe it was donated equipment, but didn't come with a service manual, or it came with a service manual, but there's not qualified, technicians who can digest that service manual or know how to do those applications. And so we're trying to fill that gap with virtual reality content, with XR development, so that we can make it so that we can democratize the education for device service. And I think that we're working with some pretty big partners. We're working with some really great organizations that think along those lines, and I do think that we're going to cross those barriers to entry gaps sooner than later.
Thanks. And of course, it links to the right to repair movement.
Yeah, absolutely.
The whole battle.
Richard, also in terms of your own organization, again, I think we need to acknowledge and we need to address, when we talk about clinical engineering practitioners, we are mindful that there are different levels of practitioner. Now, the International Engineering Alliance, it recognizes 3 levels of engineering practitioner: the professional engineer, the professional engineering technologist, and then the professional engineering technician. And I think that, again, what you have presented, I think, also lends itself to be able to package or partition not only knowledge, but bodies of practice that would be appropriate to those different levels of clinical engineering practitioner. Have you come across that in the work that you are doing or have done, in terms of how one would package, essentially interventions that are part of continuing professional development for those different cadres?
I don't know if we've encountered that yet, Mladen. I think because we're still in early days in terms of the work that we're doing, that may be a problem we've yet to encounter. I will say, kind of in there was one other comment that I want to address on here, though, and I think it's a really important one. Ryan posted in the question a comment regarding, are there not other industries that are working on similar types of training and content that could just migrate over and instead of us trying to reinvent the wheel? And I think that's a valid point, and I think this content development being created in other industries that could migrate over and address some of our training needs. But from our of our assessment and view of that is it's certainly not addressing all of our training needs. And the sort of high-end technical training that our field requires is not being addressed by the work that's being broadly approached from more of a clinical perspective. Much of the work that's being done out there in VR or the high-end technology is addressing the clinical side of the wall, not the technical side where the technicians and the engineers are working. So one of the things that we've thought about, and so I guess it kind of loosely connects to what you were describing as one of the approaches that we thought is, if you're going to maximize the value in terms of what you invest in, try to address both sides of the wall, what the clinician is dealing with and what the technician or the engineer are dealing with. And if you create content that can be utilized in a way on both sides, then you're really going to maximize the value of that effort that you put into that. Matt, did you have anything else that you would want to add to any of that?
Yeah, I think that there's, I mean, there's such an opportunity in front of us, and there's so many different ways that we can go try to take a bite of the elephant. I think that the best approach has been working collaboratively with other organizations and other teams that kind of see the vision as well, and we can, you know, really start to chip away at a really big opportunity, and we can package it to any audience. I think that that's a very repeatable model, and it's a really sustainable way to build a large content, a library very quickly.
Thank you. Yadin, would you like to add any comments? I think we are moving towards a close, but I know that you've been very active on the chat. Would you like to perhaps share some comments?
Thank you, Meladen. I appreciate that. The expert that we saw from our presenter, Monty, with his pedagogical and instruction expertise, and Matthew with the app and understanding of the possibilities of using such technology is amazing combination. It was a great presentation. It certainly surpassed my expectation, and I really appreciate the two of you coming across. As I was reading the chat, it was amazing to see how much excitement there is around the world to your comments, and how much I believe we recruited supporter to work with us moving the needle further. I still would like to see, Monty, the compass that they use never gave back to the army because it is a symbolic, you know, the foundation, the fundamentals are still there. There were comments in the chat about physiology and anatomy. We still need them just to jump and understand how to take the IKEA, Matthew furniture or the injector parts apart is not sufficient if you don't have the fundamentals. So Meladen, you mentioned the right to repair. My concern is that we work in a field that is impacting life and wellness around the world. And if we don't draw the line about who is competent to repair, and anybody that walks in wants to repair and wants the manual, that's going to be dangerous. Dangerous for the patient and dangerous for our profession. We have to keep the line on competency and who can repair, not just everyone. And that is missing from that dialogue. And I think this discussion here that we have and the apps that was presented in this webinar opened the door to increase competency and not use the excuse, well, in our part of the world, we don't have means to be trained or educated. Now we are showing that you can. So I would like to perhaps leave the audience with the understanding that if you don't pursue this lifelong training, you're going to fall behind. And just because there's a movement that says everybody have a right to repair does not mean that our patients need to be the guinea pigs to our experiments. Again, thank you for a wonderful presentation. Meladen, for your moderation, and Kali Roy for setting this all up. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.